Hi everyone, welcome to my review of Martin Scorsese's Gangs of New York in the year 2002. So yes, here we are, finally back with another Scorsese review, and yes, Gangs of New York this time, the remastered Blu-ray. It's not a great edition, but in terms of everything here, but it is the remastered version, which is important here because of course the original Blu-ray, I always remember that there was problems with it, and that's why. Actually, the reason for one of my gaps in viewing this film, for a few years actually, until last year, was to try and actually get hold of the remastered edition, weirdly. So yes, this film, yes, and I actually do still have a cold, and actually, it's kind of, plays into my viewing experience of this, this film, and this will be quite a loose review actually, I think in a good way. And yes, this film, very very divisive, very controversial film. Let's say that. Of course, it's not loved among Scorsese fans really. It did. Of course, the initial response was quite positive actually, and it did get 10 Oscar nominations. Didn't win any, but it's the year 2002, so there's things like Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, and stuff. Out. So of course, understandably, actually on that occasion. But yes, this film, it got quite a lot of praise, but then soon after, kind of thing, it was kind of hated on at times. It's never considered one of his best films really, although here and there you've got kind of a cult following of this film to say it's very very underrated. And yes, I've always got memories of watching this film. It's one of them films. Maybe I mentioned in my Dance with Wolves review back last year that this is one of the films along with this that I kind of watched when I was ill off school, obviously quite a lot. Actually, I was always off, ill, and traditionally, I do actually have a couple of Lemsip here that I am taking because I'm once again ill. I have the flu kind of symptoms. I had a cold this week, and yes, it's always the case. Usually when I watch Gangs of New York, and it's kind of fitting. Last year I had kind of a 4 year gap. Where I didn't watch this film for quite a few years, of course, and then I rewatched it 2018, that's the thing, and once again, just reminding me, and actually, I was at the point, last year, certainly in the year before, where I kind of I was a lot more open about, my favourite films, on occasions of ones that aren't that popular, and yes, of course, I have announced, I have been doing some reviews again this week of a lot of my favourite films, and yes, you'd be wondering, is it this? Is this one of them? Yes, it is, actually. And Gangs of New York, such a special film to me personally, and I know it's not that loved, but this is my personal opinion of the film and my personal, experience review kind of thing. And yes, this film, it was actually literally the first Scorsese film that I saw. Believe it or not, I must have been about seven or eight at the time. So soon after it came out, obviously it was on DVD. And yes, my dad has got this, I believe, and it was in the house. And just one time, I think when I was about seven, I watched the film, and it's something that I was kind of obsessed with. Yes, it must have been my very first Scorsese film. I watched Goodfellas and stuff when I was after 10 years old, kind of thing. Later on, a little bit soon after that, Raging Bull, Taxi Driver. They're always among my favourites. But Gangs of New York, in many ways, certainly. I was always thinking in my mind, this is something that I kind of, I kind of love so much in different ways to them films, and in the same ways, but also different, and in many ways more. This is when it gets to the kind of different approach to the film, and last year was definitely the time when I thought, yes, this is it. It's time to kind of be truly honest, and just go ahead and say, this is my favourite Martin Scorsese film, and by quite a lot, kind of quite a bit. This is in my top 30 of all time. I think it's one of the top 5 for sure, along with let's just throw them in there: The Village, Eyes Wide Shut, and maybe in terms of overrated, underrated film, Dance with Wolves. And a couple of others maybe. Top 5 most underrated films of all time. That's how good I think this is, and I think it deserves so much more recognition. I think this is, for me, yes, my favourite Scorsese film, and as I say, by far, really, for me. And I do, if you know my channel, I love Goodfellas. I think it's one of the finest films ever made. Taxi Driver, and Raging Bull, as I've said before, could be his finest film. It's very hard for me to say sometimes. If you say what is the best, well, when it comes to films that I think are magnum opuses like this one, I think it's kind of hard to say what's better. Because if a film's perfect to me, then it's very hard. I kind of at times to say what's better. But I do say this is hands down my favourite. I can certainly say that. And yes, just once again, realizing just reminding me of how much I connect to this film and how much it means to me. You know, with my film watching experiences, and just this is one of the films that represents the most. My true love, passion, my obsession with cinema and history as well. Historical pieces. It's period films, of course, and this film is very weirdly. It's kind of like a spiritual prequel. This is the thing that I've kind of slowly realised over the years so much. Why it's so meaningful as well. A spiritual prequel to where it all began for Scorsese. Really, on the streets. Kind of these low key, you could say, gangster films. Mean streets and stuff. This is where usually. For me, is at its best. These sort of locations and everything. Even Raging Bull, of course, as we know. But yes, this is kind of like a prequel. The bulk of the film, of course, being around about 1863 ish kind of thing, and within the American Civil War, of course, you got all this brewing, slavery. Kind of around the time where it's officially abolished. But of course, it didn't. That's not something that really truly got rid of everything there. But yes, it was during the time of Lincoln, of course, and yeah, such an interesting period. Certainly it's when you portray this in cinema, it really makes for something compelling and thought-provoking. Kind of cautionary tales as well. This film begins with, for me, the most investing, and just epic opening sequence to a Scorsese film, hands down. You've got the Bill the Butcher, of course, played by Daniel Day-Lewis. For me, his finest role, my favourite character that he plays, hands down, and his best performance, surpassing My Left Foot, There'll Be Blood. Now that is something to praise, what I think of this film and his performance. As Bill the Butcher, William Cutting, aka, and yes, he leads one of the gangs, in a kind of challenge, you could say, for the 5 points in New York, 1846. This is, you see Amsterdam, as a young kid. Our main protagonist, it's this War of the 5 points, with Liam Neeson leading, the Dead Rabbits, as they call them, the Clang, and basically, yes, Priest Vallon. This is a spoilers review, of course, so you have been warned, and it might be quite a long review, but yes, the Dead Rabbits against this other, gang, and they have this massive, brutal fight, battle here, for the just on the streets, and one of the tags, of course, is this is where it all began, on the streets, and this really is, something that just feels like a culmination, actually, of many of Scorsese films, and going further back, means so much, and it just, you feel this has kind of got the history of all his work, a lot of his work, of course, not all of them being, around, kind of these sort of settings, but yes, and then you've got something that's truly, it's beyond, I think, in feeling to all of his works for me personally, and you have a very, a very interesting, unique twist, the editing and everything as well. Film and Schoolmaker, of course, working once again with Scorsese, the greatest editing partnership, really, of course, as we know, and just wow, yes, we have this bloodshed, and you have this beautiful editing. It really is something that to be applauded in this film. It has been criticised, but personally for me, it's some of the best editing I've ever seen. It just really achieves the visceral kind of as well. The kind of the use of slow motion, everything. It just makes it more of a fantastical kind of unique and odd fable. This is a fable to me. It really is something that is a callback to so many films, and a combination of his work and a fable. It really is something that is legendary. Truly is a legendary tale. It combines brutality with poetics. These Shakespearean themes, no doubt. That are in his works. Even Mean Streets. You might not look at that film and think it's kind of about spirituality and faith, but it really is. And then you've got this film, which for me is just represents that. All his themes that he would dabble into. This genius director, filmmaker, over the years, and in this film, I think it's just at its heights. In the sense that how I connect to it. And I love period pieces. I love epic films, and this just it really is. It's me and my element. Combine that with Scorsese's flair, his what he brings to a period film on this occasion. This is where he has never achieved that as good as this kind of thing. The Age of Innocence and stuff. He's done some period films, of course, but this is by far for me his best. In terms of that, and for me, a contender. I'll say a contender for his best film because it's hard to say what's better out of that and Raging Bull and stuff, but yeah, no, this film, it really is, right near the top of my list of favourites, what it means to me. And with all respect, I completely understand, not everyone will say that, of course. No one will really say that, because when you're talking about films like Goodfellas, Taxi Driver and stuff, it doesn't really matter if, what the ordering is, really. As I've struggled over the years with them three films, Raging Bull and stuff, the big three, the ordering, because it's just, they're all so perfect. But this film for me, it is my favourite, but it's close, in terms of quality to maybe Raging Bull and Goodfellas and stuff. But yes, this film opens with this. Wow, this opening sequence straight away, it sets the tone for how brutal this film is. Seeing this, at the age of 7 or 8, kind of thing. I watched it quite a lot. It's my most watched Scorsese film, along with Goodfellas, actually. And yeah, seeing this, I was kind of shocked, shaken, of course. But there is a real beauty to this film, the humanity to it. It is, of course, stylistic. It's so human, this film, and there's such a tragedy. And straight away, noticing once again how investing it is emotionally. This is why I count it so high above his other works. In terms of my connection, is the emotion to the film, the kind of the themes of legacy and honor and vengeance, of course. Amsterdam, as a small kid, he sees his father, Priest Valen, brutally stabbed in front of him. He dies in his arms, and you've got Bill the Butcher, played by Daniel Day-Lewis, of course, basically saying give this kid an education. And of course, he's an Irish immigrant, kind of coming to America and stuff, and the kind of the themes of that, immigration and stuff, comes into the film so much, really, really sincerely and wonderfully. Captures the history of this and the overall, capturing the culture, the feeling behind it all, and the kind of the different, cultures, actually, many, many different cultures in the film. And I think Scorsese just infuses it, so well. And it's not only just this personal story of revenge, you could say simply. It's a culmination and really a big capturing of American history and everything involved in that, and not just specifically to the year. It's got so much infused in this, and then of course the ending when it's just shows how many forgetting these names and stuff, and how the graves are kind of covered up and everything, and then you see New York, the transition over the years and how it's changed, modernization, of course, and just many years ahead, and that is one of the most powerful transitions, just endings in cinema. I think it's a very divisive ending. I have seen it, the top 10 kind of endings of all time, and also seen it among the 30 worst endings actually on many lists. So it's obviously divisive. Let's admit that, But I think I'm on the positive side. I think it's the best Scorsese ending by far. You consider the Joe Pesci kind of the Great Train Robbery. That whole reference ending. Kind of the fourth wall break. That genius, basically, Goodfellas ending. You've got the poetic kind of ambiguous Taxi Driver, Raging Bull, which just one of the most epic endings as well, with the quote. This, for me, though, surpasses them in the ending. It really does, and just the way that music comes on at the end. The hated band, U2, weirdly. Never understood that, but everyone has personal tastes. But U2, I think, are a great, great band. Really great band. This song is probably my favourite from them. It's just The Hands That Built America. When that comes on, just booming, comes on there after that. Such an inspirational quote there, just a moving quote. This is just one of the best endings ever, in cinema for me, and just the context within, how it ends there and what's just come before it, it means so much. This song, this song infuses so much of the history of America, of course, and this is kind of it perfectly meshes, kind of traditional, stuff and modernization into the film, and it's great that U2 actually, ends with a U2 song, while also the lyrics and stuff are, about the history and everything, and it's just such an emotional song, and the way it's used combined with everything, just makes one of the best endings. And yes, it's just wow. This invests me so much emotionally. You've got Amsterdam, when he grows up, straight away cuts to 16 years ish, kind of after the events of the opening, and then we've got this wonderful and tragic, but really really beautiful tale of revenge, as it would say, kind of a synopsis. But this is more than that. It's a very very complex film. It's one of the most complex films that I've seen, and it just shows how this is not straightforward. Revenge is not always what you'd think it would be, and of course he sets out to avenge his father. And it's so felt. Liam Neeson's character was just, it's such a spiritual opening, and the way he kind of just ends it, with his son. It's so sad, brings a tear to my eye, and seeing this as well at 7, seeing that, it's something that a kid can connect to, even just the way that seeing this happen, and then you see the flashbacks throughout the film, and wow, so emotional, and just the way that it felt throughout the film, and he sets out to avenge him, and also kind of bring an acceptance, to the Irish as well, and within America at the time and everything, and it really deals with immigration stuff quite a lot in the film, and the tragedy of how people treated and everything, and it really rolls all of this into one big epic film, although shorter than quite a few Scorsese films. It's not his longest film, but it really is epic in scope. It's kind of, it's not a short film, but it's not big long film, but it manages to bring everything together so perfectly for me, and just roll it into this one grand magnum opus, no doubt, and just the way that you think things are going to happen at first, it's not that easy. Amsterdam becomes involved, of course, in Bill the Butcher, and he wants to try and get into the inner circle, of course, in order to basically really get into this, and actually eventually kill Bill the Butcher. That is the intention. But then, of course, things are very very complicated, and weirdly and very very poetically, Bill the Butcher becomes kind of like a father figure, and it's very very clear from watching this that it's very very mixed emotions that Leonardo DiCaprio's character of Amsterdam feels. He becomes emotionally attached very much to the character of Bill, and it's such a complex and tragic film. Wow, what a masterpiece. Just so emotional, and it's literally a Shakespeare level kind of tragedy, kind of telling. This story is just one of the all-time greats for me. Really is, and just the themes of honor and loyalty and vengeance. All of these, the combination and the subtlety, and the kind of, it is a satire at times, no doubt. And it's got all these themes in it that are very very subtle at times, poetic, but it is of course very visceral, and the brutality. But also, the performances, of course. Jim Broadbent plays a role in that. He's great in the film. Satire, kind of elements in the film. I loved, what Scorsese done with the humour in this film. Scorsese just one of the best. Making films that you could see are dark, on the surface, but actually so funny. Raging Bull. I think Tarantino's noted this about Raging Bull. It's a hilarious film at times, and it really is that. That it brings, it makes it more realistic actually, and more relatable and grounded. What people actually act like. Even though there's dark stuff going on, and it's got its moments of comedy in the film. Daniel Day-Lewis gives one of the 25 best performances of all time for me, no doubt, and it's just a contender for the best Scorsese performance. I'd probably say just a bit, further would be Robert De Niro, Raging Bull, personally, but I would probably give the edge on this, possibly to Robert De Niro in Taxi Driver. Scorsese, of course, just working with Robert De Niro in many films, but this film really gives it a run for its money. The performances, of course, Daniel Day-Lewis has never been better in my eyes, and the character, no doubt, his best, and the relationships throughout the film, what drive this so much. Just the way it's so invested emotionally. It's such a complex film, and Leonardo DiCaprio is just off the charts here. Very very underrated performance, one of the best I've ever seen, I have to say, ever, and certainly one of his best three or four roles, performances, but definitely my favourite character that he plays, because I just get so invested. Rarely as invested in a protagonist as this. Something that I can truly relate to throughout the entire film. This character, and just the way it's set up, and the way it develops in the film is like no other. Of course, the love story this is as well. What a beautiful film. It's of course the production, of course, throughout the film is just one of the very very best. It gives some of the great epics a run for the money. Not maybe not some of the very very finest, which we'll maybe get to this week. But yes, I think the production across the board is something truly stunning. Apparently, roughly a mile of kind of buildings was built. In terms of the sets. That's something else. The production is something to really, really just study and just admire and applaud deeply. The sets are some of the very, very best. Lavish. It has possibly my favourite visuals for a Scorsese film, and just truly something else. Scorsese is just a genius in this film in the way he directs it, and as I say, the performances are something else. Brendan Gleeson, wow, he's always a great actor, but this film, he brings a true heart and just a warmth to his character, and the way all of these characters, you see how they've changed, and they kind of remembering, of course, Amsterdam. Henry Thomas playing Johnny. Wow, he is great in this film. I wish he was in more stuff. Henry Thomas, of course, starring in one of my top 10 films of all time, E.T. And this is a one that really he is great in as well. So good. The friendship as well, as I say, that kind of is through some of these characters. Henry Thomas, his character, is really so great. The way he kind of they rekindle this friendship, and the emotions that I feel, when those of these characters die throughout the film. Just the friendships throughout the film, particularly with these characters, it's so felt, and it's so earned as well. It's how it's built up, of course, in the opening sequence, and the way it keeps looking back to this through the wonderful editing. It's always, it's kind of related so much to the emotions and these feelings, these very, very, sincere feelings, and just, as I say, the way everyone's changed as well, and different kind of power struggles, of course, over the years. You don't fully find out exactly how this came about, but you kind of, it's a wonderful way to kind of keep showing how things have changed as well. And I love these relationships across the board, throughout the entire film. Every single character really is so crucial to the film. Never a wasted scene for me. I think this is just one of the very, very best films of all time. I think in terms of the gangster genre, this is right up there. This is very, very close, I must say, for my enjoyment to Once Upon a Time in America. You'll see what I prefer when I do my ranking. When I do my favourite films list, for sure. That'll be maybe next year. It may even be the year after that, because it's going to be virtually impossible to really finalise this list. But wow, this is definitely, I must say, in my top 30 films. It's something else, and the romance, wow, just one of my very favourite romances in a film, actually. It really, as well, comes full circle in the final act. Just before that final battle, the calm before the storm. Of course, when Amsterdam is attacked by Bill. And of course you've got the revelation. He finds out that he's kind of working against him. And he's there to kill Bill. After that, of course, when he gets maimed, you see Cameron Diaz, who's just has never been better. I really don't see how she gets hate in this film. She's so great as Jenny, and she's a great character. And yes, just when she says, of course, their plans to kind of go away together to San Francisco, it's such a emotional scene, actually, and the whole romance is so perfectly developed, in my opinion. I just think it's absolutely wonderful. Among my favourite romances. Really, really emotional, and it's just so, the way it begins, actually, as well, is so kind of, it's so earned, of course, and she's a pickpocket, of course. Great character. These characters, really given an honesty. They're not kind of forced on you to necessarily straight away or love. But I do love these characters. They're so honest, of course, and it's just a real realism to the film, while also very fantastical. It just combines everything I love about cinema. But these characters are so great. What a great ensemble, of actors, and just these characters. Wow, they're so great. So this is one of the very best narratives I've ever experienced in a film. It's just it's quite hard to believe how this doesn't get enough. Yeah, it's always personal, of course, but I don't quite get how it's hated at times. Really, it's a shocker. It really is a shocker. Because it's always been one of my favourites, and I don't quite get this. But anyway, everyone feels differently, and I love the film personally. But yes, it's just one of the most beautiful love stories in cinema for me. One of the very finest. And of course this big epic film, as I've said, not that long, compared to the films, so many films I've seen, in the epic genre, but it really is rolled in so much, emotion. So it's in a personal film, so much, but big film with a massive scope, all these themes, and think about culture and immigration, and you've got all this stuff about the war. It's all of these things you'd see in an epic that sometimes would be messy. This film is described as messy, and I don't feel it is. I really think it's flawless. I think it's an absolute magnum opus, and just what I feel throughout the entire film is just total investment in everything. I think it just it's a wonderful recreation of the period, and beautiful sets. There's the editing is some of the very most genius editing I've ever seen personally, and times it reminds me a little bit Kurosawa, actually, and yes, I would like to note that Daniel Day-Lewis really actually is one of the comparable performances to some of Toshiro Mifune's. Rashomon, if you've seen that film, the animalistic kind of presence that he has is in the darker scenes, of course, when you have them perspectives in Rashomon, is actually quite close to. It's this sort of acting that Daniel Day-Lewis brings to the film. So raw, energetic, commands the screen throughout every scene he's in, and just the animalistic kind of raw, very startling, performance that he gives. The shouting that he does, it's just some of the very finest, grandest, acting I've ever seen. Then you've got the quiet scenes, when you've got some of the most masterful character development I've ever seen, where you've got and it's so felt, dramatic irony in the film throughout. It's some of the best use of that in cinema, the way that Amsterdam is, at the end of the day, there to kill him. But then, of course, you see this relationship kind of, really disturbingly, but also quite beautifully, tragically, this father-son relationship develop. It certainly is for me, anyway. It's really something else. So complex and layered. Then when he does kill him, it was one of the best scenes of all time for me. When, of course, finally Amsterdam does stab, Daniel Day-Lewis's character of Bill the Butcher, and you have that slow, just a fall, and then you see the slow motion, the eye closed, the eyelid. Wow, really, truly stunning. This is something else. One of the very best films ever made for me, and wow, that moment is just one of the best. This is going to be appearing so high on my list when I do my YouTube list, but that moment, as the eyelid closes and you see finally put to rest, it's so tragic, but so, of course, weirdly satisfying as well for Leonardo's character that he's finally avenged his father, but you feel so many emotions for this, and all the people that die as well. Stephen Graham, certainly before he was given really a lead role too much. Snatch, of course, but round about this time. But This Is England is when it really changed for him. Another one of the best films ever made for me. But yes, this film, Stephen Graham is so great. You've got John C. Reilly, a very different role to say, Boogie Nights, and in so many films. He's one of the best actors as well, but he plays kind of the villain, and of course, one of the villains in the film, someone who is not likable. Very different to him. Role for him, but just brilliant in the film. Brendan Gleeson, one of the very best in the film. Cameron Diaz, wonderful performance. I don't understand the hate. So many wonderful performances, masterful in the film, and you've just got some of the, for me, finest written characters. The energy to this film, the gracefulness of the picture. I think it's got a real energetic kind of fast, moving editing. really is something else. A visceral, kinetic, movement of the camera. But then it's really wonderful, kind of Kubrickian, kind of some of his films, the way the camera moves as well. I think it's just a wonderful film in its cinematography. I think the best use of color in a Scorsese film, actually, as well. The lighting and everything as well at night time, when you see the fireworks and everything. It's truly it's something to behold visually, and just the way it's been edited is pure perfection in my opinion. And it always says something about these characters, or the kind of the mood, and it's an extension so much, even the editing, not just the camera angles and everything. It's a real extension of the characters' emotions actually, and within the context as well. The battles. It's just so perfectly suited. It's been really criticised, the editing in this film. I think it's really a strong contender for his best editing. I think along with Raging Bull actually, definitely the best. And yes, I think it really is a contender for the best Scorsese film. I know that's not something that most people would say, but definitely my personal opinion. It's nice to see different opinions, of course, as we know. And just that ending, it's just so, it means so much in many ways, of course. The context in which it is, and just the way the Leonardo DiCaprio's voiceover is, it's so good. And of course, saying basically that they're all forgotten, really, as I say, lost in time. But for those, of course, who are, very interested in history, this sort of thing is not forgotten. Let me tell you, it's really, it's so meaningful. This film, and the way, of course, what it says there, and the way things have changed, of course. Yes, it's truly something else. And of course, when you see Cameron Diaz and Leonardo DiCaprio's characters walk off after the journey they've had, Leonardo, of course, his character Amsterdam, personally, in the film, and then together their romance, wow, really is something else. And Fade of them just walking off, just wondering, of course, how they made it, with their plans, of course, to San Francisco. Something that I'm just so caught up in, of course, this film, and then the sense of wonder at the end, it just leaves it on that, and just showing the city, changing, of course. Is something truly moving and meaningful, and yes, just across the film, of course, the way that Scorsese has brought warmth and humanity to these criminals, savage criminals. This Bill the Butcher, of course, such a savage character, animalistic, raw, ferocious character, but such a humanity to his character, and the warmth and in the heart of the film is this relationship really between him and Amsterdam, and of course the love story that it is, and it's a wonderful film, and the ending, of course, as I said, it's a strong contender for definitely one of the 25 best endings for me, and it's my favourite Scorsese ending. And yes, just maybe some discussions at the end, about the ending, in the comments would be great. But I really, really feel this ending so much, and it means so much. The way it brings everything together, and ends it on that really quite sad note, and then in the credits, just the way the U2 song, of course, The Hands That Built America plays. Wow, just epic stuff, and of course you hear modern day traffic and stuff. After that, brilliant merging, of what I call this prequel spiritually to his work, and then what his films really are known to many people, and of course you make comparisons. It's really amazing the way that it is in the credits. Just the sound effects of the cars and everything, modern day cars, the trains, and just traffic in general. Yeah, it's something that is very thought provoking. Just leaves you on that for about a minute afterwards. You hear all this, and yes, just really genius. I love the ending so much, and the credits even, just as I say, brilliant. And yes, just as I say, one of my very favourite endings in cinema. And yes, this is definitely my favourite Scorsese film, no doubt. And to say that, like hands down, kind of thing, when Goodfellas is in the mix, another one of my top 50 films really. And Raging Bull and Taxi Driver. Also one of some of my top 100 films. Absolutely, I've given them the tier S. This one absolutely gets the tier S, and of course, yes, 100% plus tier S, no doubt. Magnum opus in my eyes. This is one of the purest and most emotional epics I've ever seen. Personally, I think the use of violence is so brutal, really sincere and honest. That's at the most what you can say about the film and its violence, but for me, it's the perfect mix of brutality and kind of beauty to make it just really, really poetic in its violence. And yes, just the overall, the cinematography, the direction, flawless. The editing is some of the very, very best I've ever seen. The script, many people working on the script, of course, with Scorsese. Just a wonderful script. This is something that it's about destiny as well. And it's so infused these themes as I've been explaining. Tragedy, of course, but these themes of loyalty, family, honor, betrayal. Henry Thomas's character of Johnny when he betrays Leonardo DiCaprio's of Amsterdam, characters of Amsterdam. It's really something that you feel so mixed about, in the way that he does this. But eventually, when he does die, I felt really, really sorry for this character who's he's quite a weak person, unfortunately. But he gets used, and he's very, very scared. And at the end of the day, a human character, and this is really represents, the kind of the way this film is. It's just these characters are so complex, pretty much the most complex characters I've seen in a Scorsese, really, at times, and it's just the emotions that are felt, so complex. I feel, it really makes me cry at many moments. This film is so emotional, and I say that about a lot of films, but this is right up there. Some of the most emotional films that I've seen. The epic scale of the film, the scope, all the sets, production, absolutely brilliant, wonderful stuff. This is something to absorb and really get so excited about. And as a cinephile, really, I don't know why this isn't mentioned more in terms of its sets and its visuals. Just alone, the score, the overall soundtrack, the use of these songs, existing material, and the Howard Shore score to the film. Wow, Brooklyn Heights is something, as I say, it infuses so much emotion and history and culture into the soundtrack, and it just is one of the overall best soundtracks for me ever. And this is one of the 10 best, absolutely 10 best films of the entire century for me, and certainly one of the very, very best soundtracks. As I say, all the way up to the kind of the wonderful U2 song at the end of the film, "The Hands That Built America." Really, really, just a wonderful song. As I say, "The Hands That Built America." That is something that, wow, it's among my favourite songs actually. And of course, the instrumental kind of the way it's used at first with that ending. Wow, this is something I think is one of the very, very best endings of all time. As I've said, truly, truly stunning, this film, and the ending, as I say, just beautiful in every way. And yes, I've said enough, kind of thing, but I could talk about this forever. It's one of my very, very favourite films. Personally, it means so much to me, and kind of represented as well the kind of my love for cinema so much. It's one of my 30 favourite films, personally, and I do think personally it's a strong contender for the best, Scorsese film. Certainly, the one I connect to, as I've said, the kind of the themes in this, and the way, kind of very, very personal. The most personal themes being, the kind of the way he tries to avenge his father is something very, very moving. Truly, truly moving and felt. Personal epic. The best epics, of course, are the personal ones. Not the ones that are just showing history or kind of big, big scale, but kind of ones that are personal so much throughout, where you follow these characters, and you feel the emotions. Examples: Lawrence of Arabia, of course, the Godfather films, the first two, The Deer Hunter, all these films, maybe a film that I'll get to very soon as well, but the best epics are the personal ones, and this is no exception. It brings in many, many different broad, big, big themes into the film, but something that meshes it perfectly for me with this emotional, very, very simple at first, but in the end, so complex tale of revenge, redemption. What I felt for Bill the Butcher, one of the most kind of animalistic characters in a film, just brutal and raw, and just hateful character. But then the warmth actually at times is so unique. The warmth in many of the scenes that he's in the middle of the film, especially when he's bringing kind of the relationship, of course, the advice he gives to Leonardo DiCaprio's character, the way he kind of consoles him and actually becomes a father figure. It's really something else. And when he dies, a lot is felt of course, and stuff that if you saw this for the first time, maybe you wouldn't think you'd feel. You feel, in the opening, of course, he kills the priest, the father, and Amsterdam. Of course, he's the villain of the film. It seems, but wow, what a complex villain. And the performance is absolutely mind blowing, in my opinion. The music throughout is just absolutely stunning. Wow, the feelings I get from this, the combination of the score and the original music, of course, by Howard Shaw, and all the songs injected into this, and what it kind of brings together with the history of everything. Wow, what a film! Gangs of New York. Such a recommendation, to get the remastered Blu-ray, and it's just for me, one of the finest films ever made. I know that's not an opinion many people would hear too often, but my opinion, and I love this film, and once again, a real comfort in watching this. Just a film that I can watch so much, to return to for the comfort levels as well, and it's just one of the most epic, kind of entertaining, compelling, epic films I've ever seen, and it's a legendary fable. The combination of brutality and fantastical nature of the film. The dialogue, absolutely stunning. It's some of the most engaging dialogue I've ever seen. One of the most emotional epics I've ever seen. This is Gangs of New York. It's an absolutely mind-blowing film, in my personal opinion. It means so much to me, and yes, one of the very, very best films ever made, right up there with Once Upon a Time in America, in terms of the gangster genre. I do think the two Godfather films are, the two best gangster films. I'll review them in August, actually, because we've got the final cut of Apocalypse Now coming then. So I think it's a good time to actually just watch them three films, certainly around the same time. So we'll get to them in August, yes. But apart from them, this is really, along with Once Upon a Time in America, my favourite gangster film, after them. And yes, certainly recommend it. But again, it's just my personal opinions. I'm not saying that this is the best, although I think as a contender, I'm saying it's my personal pick, the one that means the most to me. And yes, just Gangs of New York. It's so emotional. It's epic, legendary. It's brutal. It's just a shocking, visceral film. The editing, it's everything. This is just a hypnotic film. At times, so much. The applause that I give Scorsese and everyone involved for this wonderful magnum opus, in my opinion. This is one of the finest films ever made. Mind blowing. A shocker to know that this is not too loved, but personally, I do feel this, and no doubt I'm honest in saying it is my favourite Scorsese. So yes, thanks for watching. Of course, leave your thoughts in the comments, and again, just my personal opinion on this one. Everyone, it's not an opinion that's very popular, but yeah, it's my personal thoughts. Gangs of New York has always been one of my favourite films, and definitely I can say safely it's my favourite Scorsese film, and it's just a perfect film for me, combining everything that I love about cinema. And Scorsese, as I say, it's a spiritual prequel to all of his work, really, and a culmination as well of many works of his career. Thank you, Mr. Scorsese, once again. But truly, once again, so many films I love from this guy, but this is for me the one that really moves me the most, and it's just my favourite. So once again, a salute, and just an admiration for this film, and Scorsese, of course, a celebration, of his work. And yes, thanks for watching my review.